All in Sports Network. We love sports.
Hello, welcome into All In Aggies. I'm your host, as always, Ben Peck. On today's show, we are going to be examining the Thor on campus in College Station, Theo, Melin, Öhrström. 2 consecutive games with a touchdown. We got to talk to him this week at the weekly media availability for Texas A&M football. So got to hear a little bit about his backstory. We'll go into that a little bit and just what has led to his emergence lately. And is he potentially one of the better receiving options, especially as the Aggies get closer to the red zone? How does his career project forward? All that's coming up on today's show. We'll also examine Taylen Green, the Arkansas quarterback, what he gives you, what challenges he presents to you, how the Aggies have to go about trying to corral him as best as possible. But if you haven't already, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you like about the show. Start the conversation in the comments, and let's get this going. We want this, as we say, to be a community where we all come together to discuss our favorite topics about Texas A&M athletics. And we'll touch a little bit on some other sports as well, time permitting, toward the end. All right, let's get right to it. Theo, Melin, Öhrström, the Thor himself. Huge impact, almost scored on what looked like about the same play against Florida that he did Bowling Green. 2 touchdowns in the last 2 games. Of course, he was part of that 2022 recruiting class. I always say the demise of that class from outside of Texas A&M, I think, is greatly overstated and exaggerated. Not to say, obviously that class on paper, if it was going to put you on pace to be, a number 1 like team in the country right now, that hasn't panned out, but it's still a very solid class with a lot of good contributors, pieces to build around. And interesting with Theo is he came in obviously from Sweden. So I think everyone knew he was like the classic intriguing prospect that you hate to say a project, but a developmental player. It's going to take a little bit of time for him to really become a factor on a game-by-game basis. But he's starting to do that. He's starting to find his spots. It's still work in progress, but 3 catches and 2 of them are touchdowns for 65 yards total on the season. Not bad for the redshirt sophomore. He talks about in his origin story, so to speak, at least as it relates to football, grew up as a soccer fan in Sweden and had 2 friends who were half American. And I think one of those dads was from Seattle, big Seahawks fan. So they kind of got into football. They just kind of play around at, gatherings and such, just informally, tossing football around the pool or something along those lines. Eventually got linked up with a program that helps European players come to the United States for football camps, and goes to a school, like a boarding school, where he can play football and start to get recruited. Obviously, he comes to a camp in 2022, or I guess leading up to 2022, I should say. Catches the eye of the staff for Jimbo Fisher at the time, gets the offer, and the rest is, I don't even want to say history. It's still evolving. The rest, that's how the history starts. But 2 touchdowns in the last 2 games, as we said. Theo, the bite we're going to use today, this is him talking about what helped him turn the corner, how he became, an experimental prospect in a way to now a regular contributor on this team. What were the biggest things he needed to do to put himself in that position? And then Mike Elko kind of on what he recalls from the time and what he saw with Theo during the recruiting process at the time.
The biggest challenge, first coming in my first year, it was just obviously back home, I really hadn't blocked a whole lot, again, coming up. So I really just played receiver. I was just a big receiver who'd go up and get the football. So I'd definitely say learning how to be physical was my main issue, first starting here. And I feel like I've kind of embraced my weaknesses and made sure to just work on them as much as possible. And I feel like over the past 2.5 years, I've made made my physicality definitely a lot better.
Remember him just showing up at a camp and to some degree catching my eye as I was looking at defensive players, and he was running routes and doing some of those things, and certainly jumped out from an athleticism standpoint. Obviously wasn't here the first 2 years when he was getting his feet underneath him and learning how to play football at the level required to play in this conference. And I think since we've been here, I think we've just noticed a kid who's really committed to working every day. He's obviously really talented. He's athletic. He can run routes. He can create separation. He's also physical at the point of attack. And so, I think he's just continued to grow every single week, every single game, and has been a factor for us big time the last 2 weeks.
So, as you heard, Theo, Melin, Öhrström, and Mike Elko there. He's been really impressive for me. I think he's a valuable depth piece. I mean, he's still got an impressive frame to work with. He still is, I think, just scratching the surface, I think is what makes him the most intriguing. 6'6", 265, but obviously moves pretty well for his size. Pretty decent hands, especially down the field. I think that excites me, thinking, if you can make downfield catches, you can hopefully make the easier ones that aren't as far down. I will say the 2 catches he made, I think, were a little, especially Florida, busted coverage. So that obviously helps and makes it a little easier. But listen, the tight end position, he went on to talk about this too. In the Colin Klein offense, that's a huge priority. I think you're going to have to get used to, as a Texas A&M fan, moving forward, as long as this Colin Klein offense stays intact, or even if Colin Klein leaves and you bring in another coach, I think you're going to have to get used to the idea of having needing multiple guys in the tight end room to step up and to be, effective contributors because of how much they use them, how many 2 tight end sets they have. He talked about his touchdown dance was kind of something he and Trey Watson came up with, like, hey, whenever we score our first touchdown and we're both on the field, we're going to do this thing. A meaningless detail, but hey, they're going to be on the field a lot. That was what that told me. They know that, like I said, there's going to be a lot of 2 tight end sets, and those tight ends are going to be asked to do a variety of things. He's still is still not a guy who has caught like volume, but that's also a bigger problem that we've talked about ad nauseum with this offense for Texas A&M. Just the volume of any one of these receiving options has been very, I don't even want to say limited, but it's been very spread out, almost like, I don't want to say comically because that infers it's bad, but it's amazing the precision to which, I mean, Cyrus Allen is your only receiver with more than 100 yards receiving, 10 receptions for 181, then 10 for 78 with Noah Thomas, 9 for 76 with Ja'Day Walker, and then you go down yardage-wise. Theo is next at 65 yards, but you've got Trey Watson, 5 receptions, Jabri Barber, 5 receptions. He's working his way back from injury, so he presumably will be more of a factor moving forward. So I say that to say, it'd be nice to know that you have a tight end or tight ends that you could go to any given game for 4, 5, 6, 7 receptions if needed. I don't know if Theo has shown that just yet, but I don't know that any receiving option has shown that just yet. I think that maybe speaks more to how the offense has been flowing, with obviously the change of quarterback and trying to get everyone on the same page with Marcel Reed, Connor Wigman, whoever it may be. By the way, I do think from just listening to Mike Elko on Monday, it seemed to be, I'll put it this way. He had multiple opportunities to say, when asked about Marcel Reed, hey, we're still, emphasize Connor could be starting on Saturday. Like, Connor's not lost his job. We're still evaluating it, this and that. He didn't go as far to say, Marcel Reed is now our guy moving forward. But he didn't strongly come out to give me an idea to suggest that Connor Wigman will be available this Saturday, or that if he is, he'll be the guy. So I'm kind of presuming it's going to be Marcel Reed. I haven't seen, this is my failure, I haven't seen at the time that I'm recording this an injury report. Let me do one last little check to see if there is, in fact, any update as to Connor Wigman's status. Actually, just came out. Let's see. Anyways, while I look at that, I think Theo is a guy who can be maybe 2 years from now, especially next year. I think he could really be a guy who you see maybe 50 receptions or so in terms of having the capability to do that. And then maybe senior year, if it all works out, you're talking about an all conference performer type of guy. So we'll see how that goes. Again, Theo Melin Öhrström, he's been dominant. Good for him. I'm looking at this injury report. I haven't seen anything on Connor Wigman just yet, but we continue on. All right. If you haven't already, subscribe, like, comment. Let us know what you like about the show. Let us know what you want to talk about the show, things that you're interested in, things that aren't, especially what we like to do on the show. What we try to do is to talk about topics that have not gotten their due diligence and that have not been sort of that don't get the time of day as much as they should. That is sort of what we like to do here, what we try to do. Obviously, it's a very, I don't want to say oversaturated market. I think there's a ton of interest in college athletics, Texas A&M in particular. I think A&M is one of those unique schools where you can have an interest in like legitimately all the sports across campus. Like, with Syracuse, if you try to do a sideline, if you try to do a show where you're talking about Syracuse soccer, men and women, I mean, men just won a national championship not that long ago. Field hockey, volleyball. In terms of doing numbers, I don't know that you're going to do that at Syracuse. But at Texas A&M, I think there's enough Aggies. They're good at enough sports. They bring in some of the best talent from across the country, across the world, really, to where we should try to give each of those teams their due diligence. And but not just that, even for the teams that get tons of coverage, football, basketball, and the like, let's try to find the things that people aren't really talking about and that you would like for the discussion on. So I know a lot of people are talking about Theo today, but just thought that was a fun little story there. All right, now let's talk about Taylen Green, Arkansas quarterback. How do the Aggies deal with him? So Taylen Green and really Arkansas in general, kind of been a weird season, like difficult to evaluate in my opinion. They're 3-1, so you got to give them that. They blew the doors off Arkansas Pine Bluff, regardless of what jerseys they wanted to wear. That was a whole drama during that game. 70-0. I don't really take anything away from that. They had it against Oklahoma State on the road. That would have been a nice win for the SEC. But you fall in double overtime. Probably shouldn't have. Probably should have won that game in regulation. In that game, Taylen Green, see, this is what I'm talking about. Taylen Green, 26 for 45, 416 through the air, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 18 for 61 on the ground. That was with 3 sacks included in those rushing figures as well. Keep in mind, went to double overtime, so the game was longer, more plays, all that, but still not bad. But then you come out against UAB, and like that game was way too close if I'm an Arkansas fan, and it was kind of their Bowling Green, so to speak. I think UAB is probably better than Bowling Green, but Arkansas, especially the difference with that game, I'm going to double check this, but from my recollection, as opposed to A&M, they were like down significantly, I think, at certain points. Okay, not significantly, but they were down 10-0 in the first quarter, 2017 in the second quarter, tie game at the half. A&M at least like still had a 10-point lead at the half against Bowling Green. Just never really clamped down too much, but never felt like, and I said this talking about the Bowling Green game, I never felt like there was a chance Texas A&M was going to let that slip through. Like the touchdowns they got were big busted plays rather than, UAB, first half, they have 4 scoring drives. Some big plays sprinkled in there, but a lot of just long drives, 15 yards for 66 on the opening drive, 8 plays for 70 yards on a field goal, 8 plays, 75 yards on another touchdown drive. Like, they were able to move the ball against Arkansas. And Taylen Green, interception, that was tough at the time. Made some plays, as I said, with his legs. Boise State transfer. Saw what he did there last year. Although I will say, even going back to his Boise State days, I mean, last year, 11 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 14 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. This has not been a guy who has the track record of excellent ball security, in my opinion. He's running a lot more and a lot better at Arkansas with Bobby Petrino as his offensive coordinator, mind you. But the thing with him is, and to actually give some positive, I know it's a little complicated. It's good and bad. You're 3-1, but he can make big explosive plays at any time, almost breaking whatever trend or rhythm that he seems to be in at the moment as well. I think that's the thing that is the most it's not scary, but the most like unnerving in terms of getting a sense of what type of thing are we preparing for? What type of quarterback are we going to see on Saturday? So against UAB, 11 for 26, 161 yards, no touchdowns, 1 pick, 2 touchdowns on the ground, 17 for 96, and was sacked 3 times. I counted in those stats again. And then Auburn. I mean, Auburn and Arkansas, that was a game that kind of felt like the A&M Florida game. A&M looked better against Florida than Arkansas did against Auburn, no doubt, mind you. But in the sense that Arkansas won on the road, they were the better team. They probably are the better team. I think they are the better team, safe to say, than Auburn. But there are flaws with Arkansas, and there are things that they still need to figure out, haven't figured out. I think the same can be said for Texas A&M, especially in that game against Florida. Now, the difference with that game is you come out and you just – I think the game 33-20 doesn't do it justice with how much they beat them in that game, and it was more impressive to come out, establish – like Arkansas, it took a while for them to get some separation against Auburn, but A&M went out against Florida, took control of the game, got interrupted by a lightning delay, and then took control of the game again, and then just kind of managed it to the point where – you were playing rather conservative, some would say, cautiously and intelligently, you could argue as well. I think obviously a factor with that too is Marcel Reed in terms of how impressed you were by the victory. For you were worried maybe that could be tricky, drop off, yikes, but it was actually like, oh, this is probably for that stretch. That was the best we've seen this Texas A&M offense all year, no question. I guess you could throw the McNeese steak in there, but given the competition, the setting, and all that, even as bad as Florida is in some areas, that was impressive. Arkansas against Auburn, which is the team that has some major red flags, in my opinion. Took them a while, but they got there eventually. 12 for 27, 151, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, 18 attempts for 80 yards on the ground, with 3 sacks thrown in there as well. So you can get to him, but he can obviously burn you with his legs. We all know about, as we said earlier, Bobby Petrino, what he can do with his quarterbacks. You'd like to think, if you're an Arkansas fan, you'd like to think the more they get on the same page and the more they figure out what works, what doesn't, what he can do well, what he can't, what's asking too much, where you can maybe ask a little bit more, that gets a little scary. But the big thing for me too is it's sort of the standard deviation, if you will, of some of these plays. I mean, to finish with, I know the yardage doesn't pop off the screen, but I mean, last 3 games, as I said, 44% completion, 42% completion, 57% completion, and you have significant chunk plays thrown in there, and if you include what he's doing with his legs as well, his longest runs of the year, 36 in the first game, 31 against Oklahoma State, 14 against UAB, 22 against Auburn. So he can make big plays out of nowhere and when plays break down. I think maybe that's what the scariest thing is you could do your job for the first 6-7 seconds of the play. You think you've got him. Someone will bring him down in the backfield. Someone will, surely. And then all of a sudden rolls out, makes a play, throws it up. He's got receivers who have speed, who can beat you deep, but also can go up and get a ball over a guy if they need to. They're not the absolute top end of the SEC level receivers in that regard, but they're good enough to where you hold your breath if they throw up a jump ball to see what they're going to do. This is Mike Elko talking about how you go about limiting the capability of Taylen Green, especially what he can do with his legs to hurt you in this type of game.
Yeah, that's always an interesting question because that's a word that I think general fans have used, like, oh, you just spy the quarterback, and like it's way more complicated than that because within the I don't mean that because of the question, but like when you look at, okay, we're running an 11-man defense. It takes 11 people to fit the run. They're going to call a play. They may run the football. We can't just say like, oh, you spy the quarterback, right? And so I think what you try to do first and second down within each of your coverage structures, each of your defenses, is you're trying to identify as the play goes out who kind of becomes the guy paying attention to him if he does pull the ball down. So I don't know that it's specific to this guy spies him. It's kind of as the play unfolds, as the route concept develops, as the coverage develops, who winds up in that spot that has to make sure he keeps secondary eyes on him. I think we're a little bit fortunate because we had some preparation with this with Notre Dame. I think we faced a dual threat quarterback against Notre Dame that was a very similar type mindset in terms of how you had to go about this. And so that helps, but still they present different challenges. So we got to make sure we count for him.
So there you go. I think that's accurate. Interesting. Like he's going to be a different type of runner than KJ Jefferson you've seen the last couple of years. Obviously, I think he's more dynamic and I think he's more boom or bust. Like I think KJ, he can break off a big play, but the thing that he kills you with is you can, other than when he's Supermaning into the end zone trying to score a touchdown, you get a scoop and score handoff to Damani Richardson. Other than when he's helping you out doing that, he could scramble around and maybe even if he doesn't break the big one, he can still buy extra yards that he shouldn't have been able to do. And either avoiding sacks in the pocket or making, an 8-yard sack, 3-yard sack, or turning a short gain into a gain of 4, and then they'll break the big one. Taylen Green, I feel like, is more like if you get him, you can bring him down. He can be sacked, but if he gets out, like, look out. That's kind of my read on how the two compare. They did sack KJ Jefferson quite a bit last year. I do think that's maybe another difference. I think KJ wants to play in the pocket more. Not that Taylen Green doesn't, but I feel like Taylen Green knows what he's good at and knows where he can really affect the game and is not afraid to lean on that, as opposed to KJ Jefferson with the run that was more of a useful tool that you could go to if need be, but didn't necessarily have to lean on in that sense. So Taylen Green shutting down his ability. Well, I think he's the game. When you throw him in with their rushing attack, that's going to be obviously not to repeat the obvious, or restate it too much, but that is the game: is limit big plays. Can you get him to hand you some turnovers and help you out a little bit? Can you count on it? I don't know that you can count on it, but I don't know that you can. If you're Arkansas, that you can count on them protecting the ball either. I don't think it's quite Auburn level territory where you say, okay, they're going to give us the ball a couple times. But I also don't know that. Obviously it should be a priority and something you try to do. Jaquindon Jackson is that running back, 472, leads the team with rushing, 325 for Taylen Green. So that's kind of your running back tandem, is your running back and your quarterback. Jackson's really good. The run defense has been a problem for A&M, as we've discussed, as Mike Elko has discussed, and more of an issue than just the run defense is that they've been able to see results improving against the run against Bowling Green, but it came at the expense of the passing attack. You haven't been able to see just like same game plan, just everyone is doing their job better, which allows for better performances. It was more of a schematic adjustment that then, I don't even want to say schematic adjustment. I don't think it was a massive, but it definitely, for whatever reason, you shut down the run better against Bowling Green, and then you gave up more passes, and you were not disciplined on the back end on reverses and all sorts of other things in that sense. So we'll see how the Aggies do. Again, Saturday, 2:30 kick, Arlington. The last one, Arlington, which is, I don't know. I think for A&M fans, we'll talk more about that later this week. But I think for me, the Arlington factor is more interesting and exciting for A&M fans than it is for Arkansas. I understand people, even A&M fans, who want that game to be on campus, which it will be moving forward. But I think like lukewarm on it, but it's fine and it's interesting. And when you're there, you're like, this is kind of cool, especially being in Texas and knowing how many Texas high school football players are on the roster for the Aggies. I know Arkansas has its fair share as well, but knowing what playing at that stadium means to people in Texas who play Texas high school football, obviously the pinnacle of where you want to try to go to play for a state championship. So I think that vibe is always cool. If you're from Arkansas or if you're not from Texas even, I think that part's just kind of overrated, whatever. It could be NRG. It could be any sort of NFL stadium. It doesn't really matter. And, I know Arkansas has the deal where they play at Little Rock too. So they already lose an on-campus home game doing that. And then when this goes down as a home game for them, you lose another home game. That's why I think they're probably, if I had to guess, they're probably less sad to see this thing go than whatever Aggies are sad. And even Aggies, I think the Metroplex Aggies may be a little sad, but I don't think that's the core fan base of Texas A&M. I think, there are Aggies in the Metroplex. I'm not saying there are not, but I think more based in Houston and, Southeast Texas and such. So we'll see. It'll be an interesting atmosphere. It'll be fun. I don't know, man. Is it going to be another one of those wacky games? I guess potentially. I could see like a couple wacky plays happening, especially with turnovers in that regard. And it's been pretty good. Marshall Reed especially has been pretty good about, I think, not putting the ball into jeopardy. So I think that's been, I know Le'Veon Moss, I think it was, had the fumble late in the game against Bowling Green. I don't know. Forget even the numbers, but just watching the team, and if I feel like I'm holding my breath for turnovers when the A&M's on offense, I don't know that I've been too worried about that factor. I think I would be if I was an Arkansas fan, especially how much they go for it, as we discussed. So we'll see. Maybe something like that happens. Can rejuvenate the Aggies in the stands, 12th man that's going to be in attendance in Arlington, maybe. But then again, I think Arkansas is going to probably have potential for more big explosive plays to get them ramped up than A&M, more methodical, more just, gain of 5, gain of 6, gain of 3, gain of 8, like just work their way down the field. And Arkansas, like, okay, maybe they go 3 and out, and then maybe next drive they come back with a 22-yard completion and a 56-yard touchdown. Who knows? So we'll see how it all shakes out against Arkansas on Saturday. And I think that'll do it for today. We'll save some of the other topics for later on this week. That is all in Aggies for, was it Wednesday, September 25th? I had to think about that for a second. Be sure to subscribe, like, comment. I've just figured out how to get the podcast going. So you can download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to listen to it in audio form, take it on the road with you as you go. Again, follow me on social media at the Ben Peck with KAGS, the NBC affiliate in College Station, as well as KCEN, NBC in Waco. Follow me. I've got content there and a little sneak peek on some of the stuff we'll be discussing on the show throughout the week. Thank you so much. Subscribe, like, comment if you haven't already for one last time. Ben Peck with All in Aggies, and we will see you back here on Thursday.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.